Shocking silence from the biggest women's groups in the country as the squad reaches a disgusting new low in their defense of Hamas. Progressive Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal downplaying the numerous and well-documented rapes of Israeli women by the terrorists.
I've condemned what Hamas has done. I've condemned
Specifically
all
against
of
women?
the actions. Absolutely. The rape, of course. But I think we have to remember that Israel is a democracy. That is why they are a strong ally of ours.
I'm asking you about Hamas. In fact,
I already answered your question, Dana. I said it's horrific, and I think that rape is horrific, sexual assault is horrific. I think that it happens in war situations. Terrorist organizations like Hamas obviously are using these as tools. However, I think we have to be balanced about bringing in the outrages against Palestinians.
but you don't see Israeli soldiers raping.
Well, Dana, I think
Palestinian women.
we're not. I don't want this to be the hierarchy of oppressions.
Yeah, you do. So Jayapal thinks we need to be balanced when talking about atrocities like this. An October 7th survivor says he witnessed as many as 10 Hamas terrorists brutally assaulting and gang raping an Israeli woman. The victim, who screamed out to be killed, was then tragically shot in the head. And where are the women's groups? We've reached out to some of the top female advocacy organizations in the country that support liberal causes and asked them if they condemn her. So far, crickets. Dana, and the White House could barely condemn the squad. Watch.
Was that an appropriate comment?
What Hamas did is absolutely reprehensible, and full stop. Rape and the use of rape as being used as a weapon, that is also reprehensible, and that's full stop. And I'll just leave it there. And I'm speaking for the President of the United States, so I think I've been very clear on that.
Any comment, though, for Congresswoman Jayapal?
I just commented on it. I just laid out what we believe is unacceptable.
Oh, say, Dana, from a communications perspective, when you say gang rapes, you probably don't want to say the word but or however afterwards.
Just stop, like as Corinne Jean-Pierre said, full stop. I wonder if the White House ever gets tired of having to figure out a way to not offend the squad but defend themselves in this situation. I found this very discouraging. I knew anti-Semitism existed. I just didn't know that it that it would extend so much to specifically to Israeli women, as if they don't matter at all. And when she says, you mentioned it too, I wrote it down, that when Jayapal says, I don't want to get into the hierarchy of oppression, like, yes, you do. That's what we have to do every day, because that's what you guys bring up constantly. And this isn't like it's October 8th and we're wondering if there were rapes. We absolutely know. That news has been there, and she has access to information. I guess either she chooses not to see it, or maybe she hasn't heard from the State Department. The State Department has said today, confirmed something that the IDF said over the weekend, that Hamas may not release any more of the prisoners, especially the women. Why? Because they don't want it to be known what happened to them in captivity. So I can only assume there's been more mass rape and violence against women. She says that this is not an easy question. This is actually the easiest question I've ever heard. The other thing I would just end with is all those women's groups that you put up there, over and over again, we see the same pattern. They marched in lockstep in their condemnation of all sorts of people in the Me Too movement, right? Believe all women. These are the same groups, though, who, if you go back to the late 1990s, they all walked away from defending Monica Lewinsky. They all will turn a blind eye to something if they think that it will help their political position or it will protect them from condemnation by somebody like Jayapal. If I were there, I would be thrilled to be condemned by Jayapal. It would be an honor.
Are you shocked that these women's groups didn't even get back to our producers, Judge?
Yeah, I am shocked because for the longest time, I mean, I was part of that original movement, which, was fighting for rape victims, making sure that rape victims didn't have to take a lie detector test, making sure that a defense attorney could not say to the jury, well, she was dressed that way, she deserved it. I mean, I was there in the beginning. But then all of a sudden, about 10 years ago, we have this Me Too movement as though they just discovered, the abuse and the suppression of women. But this new progressive, so-called progressive group is really a regressive one. They are taking back the decades of progress that we've made, fighting for women's rights, fighting to make sure that women are not suppressed or oppressed by this, what clearly is a war crime. But this is how it's being looked at. Greg describes it as the oppressor and the oppressed. I see it as their ideology, their politics pretty much dictates their belief system. And that prioritizes everything for them so that it clouds the truth. It clouds right and wrong. We know that there were rapes. We know their pelvises were broken. We know that their bodies tell us in death what happened to them in life. But what they are saying is that whether or not you're oppressed depends upon what group you belong to. And if we believe that you are not part of our tribe, our ideology, or our group, then you are not oppressed. And I'll tell you, aside from all these women's groups, aside from the UN and its silence, I mean, I have no use for them anyway. I think they do nothing but crowd traffic in New York. The woman that stuns me is Michelle Obama. Hashtag bring our girls home. Where is she now? Where is she now that we know that the women who are now prisoners and hostages, you think they're having lunch and tea every day? I don't think so. And finally, these women are destroying other women, and the hard left activism is destroying women's rights in this country.
Harold Ford Jr.
So I think Cheryl Sandberg, first of all, it's good to be back around the table. Hope everybody had a good weekend.
Yep.
Cheryl Sandberg, I think, said it really well, capsulized a lot of it. She said this, talking about how the world is looking at this and responding to the fact that some of the groups that you put up on the screen that Dana and the judge have talked about have not responded forcefully. She said this goes beyond politics. I'm going to paraphrase. This goes beyond politics. If we can't agree that rape is wrong, what is happening to our humanity? I think it diminishes and makes it harder to take credibly the argument of pro-Palestinian activists when who I think argue for a two-state solution. That's an honorable outcome and should be something we all aim for. But you can't argue that and expect people to listen to you if you first can't say release the hostages, and two, the actions of Hamas in Israel on October the 7th, as Greg consistently points out, was horrendous, was inhumane, and that at no time, there's no moment where you should ever be able to, you ever use the word rape and say, but, however, but let me say this. This is just wrong. And it's unfortunate that we can't get to a more reasonable and sensible and long-term conversation, because those who are advocating on behalf of the Palestinians, at least some in our own country, are doing it in such a horrible and counterproductive, and I'll use the word that my friend Cheryl Sandberg used, an inhumane way.
Greg, there was a lot of discussion about you don't want to conflate the Palestinians with Hamas. Okay, but it would help if the Palestinians and their supporters like her would condemn Hamas.
Yeah, their silence is conflating themselves with Hamas. It's amazing when you consider the Me Too movement in that context. We went from believe all women to believe no women if they're Jewish, right? And it's not about like where are the women's groups. It's like who do the women's groups represent? Who do they represent now? We know they don't represent any Republican women or libertarian women or pro-life women or independent women. Among feminists, they don't represent women in sports who don't want to compete against men. They don't represent women who believe in legitimate safe spaces away from men, right? They don't represent, obviously, Jewish women, and they don't represent white women unless they buy a dinner where they confess that they're an oppressor to woke scholars. And I'm trying to think who's left to represent. Is it men who say they're women? Because once you no longer stand up for victims of mass rape, what good are you as a women's group, right? You're worthless. You're pathetic. I think we need to reframe this because we've been too easy on these idiots. We've given them a free ride by describing October 7th as an act of terror, because we know the knee-jerk response when you call somebody a terrorist. They always say, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And then you start talking about the historical context. Well, there is no historical context for sexual atrocity. That is the word, that's the phrase that needs to be employed from now on October 7th. It was a sexual atrocity, because then You don't leave any wiggle room to these misogynist monsters out there. The label is 100% true, and the evidence is there, as opposed to something like Kavanaugh, where one allegation, recent allegation, decades ago, no evidence, and that was an abomination, and yet you have a mountain of dreadful evidence, and they don't do it. So every moment you spend on behalf of the perpetrators makes you an apologist for the world's only planned sexual atrocity in modern history. When you come face to face with these protesters or you have them on a TV show, you have to ask them, how can you accept sexual atrocity? If they deny it, then they should be called sexual atrocity deniers. And that should stick with them for the rest of their lives. Because I think what happened was we allowed an out on this. We kind of moved away from this when we should have just said, wait a second, this is like the UN waited, a month, 2 months? Right. And it's because we didn't call it what it was. We just kept saying act of terror. Mm-hmm. And I think if you just put that label on it, they can't. Right now, we have misogyny harnessed by Marxism to carve out power for these people. That's all it is. That's why they don't care. They didn't care about Monica Lewinsky, and then they cared about Brett Kavanaugh, and now they don't care about this. It makes you wonder, this is orchestrated, but it's also deeply emotional. What hole is this filling for all of these unhappy women? They're all in cities. There's so many young women willing to align themselves to a movement that denies sexual atrocity. What is that energy shift coming from? Why are they doing this? I don't think it's making them any happier. Is it because the society of leisure made it so that they can migrate to extreme beliefs because all the other beliefs are taken? I don't know. How many moms are okay with this? I don't think there are any.
No, there's definitely something missing in their lives, that's for sure. Sexual atrocity, that is a powerful word.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.